Well, this series wasted no time in going downhill. Beneath the Planet of the Apes is a sequel to the original classic. It picks up immediately afterwards with Taylor and Nova going deeper into the Forbidden Zone. However, Taylor mysteriously disappears, and Nova eventually comes across another crashed astronaut who followed the trajectory of the ship from the last movie. This astronaut's name is Brent. He is played by James Franciscus, and he too comes across the Society of Apes in his mission to find Taylor. He comes across familiar characters, although both of them soon get more than they bargained for when they actually do find Taylor. They turn out to find a society of humans. However, these are intelligent humans, and not only that, these are mutants who were affected by the nuclear radiation that initially caused this post-apocalyptic state of the Earth. So these humans are equipped with the power of illusion and telepathy. Yeah. And I understand that this movie has a lot of people who like it, but I am not one of them. I really, really can't stand this movie. And there are a lot of reasons why. Honestly, okay, I'll get to that in a minute, but what better place is there to start than the acting? Well, the acting, I can't really complain. James Franciscus is very good as Brent, the new astronaut. True, at times he does kind of feel like a discount Charlton Heston, but at the same time, there are a lot of other points in the movie where he does manage to have his own identity, rather than just kind of like, oh, it's not Taylor. So he's fine. Linda Harrison as Nova is still good. She still doesn't talk, or at least for the main portion of the movie, she doesn't talk. Which, I think in the hands of the right actor or actress can really serve to strengthen their memorability and performance, and that remains true here. Nova still remains a likable character. I'm a little disappointed that Roddy McDowall is not in this movie, although he was busy at the time that they were filming this, so I know why he's not here. He is instead replaced by David Watson, who, he's okay, but when I said that James Franciscus established his own identity as completely separate from Charlton Heston at points, that basically is the opposite in the case of David Watson, because David Watson at all times, he's kind of trying to do an impression of Roddy McDowall's character. Or he is playing Roddy McDowall's character, he's just doing an impression of Roddy McDowall. But at all times Roddy McDowall's character had a certain sternness that I don't think David Watson's portrayal has. I mean, David Watson's portrayal comes off as more spineless, and as a result, less compelling. Although Kim Hunter is still very good as Zira. I mean, she's still as strong a female lead as ever. And the minor players like Maurice Evans as Dr. Zaius, and newcomer James Gregory, or series newcomer James Gregory as General Ursus, this guerrilla general, this really one-dimensional guerrilla general. They're fine, although they're not really given much to do. I mean, they are just kind of relegated to generic bad guys this time around. I mean, Dr. Zaius in the first movie was fairly interesting, or at least as far as a villain like that could be. I mean, he had legitimate reasons for covering up the truth. Here, he's just kind of sidelined for a lot of it, and leading the charge is General Ursus, who is not nearly as interesting a character. Like I said, he's just kind of a stock bad guy, which, Orson Welles was apparently offered the role of General Ursus, before it actually went to James Gregory. Um, Maybe Orson Welles could have done more with this, but honestly, James Gregory does fine. It's just the writing that bogs him down. Same with Maurice Evans as Dr. Zaius. Um, Charlton Heston is good while he's there. I mean, Charlton Heston, I can't really say he gives a bad performance, but I just really wish he was the protagonist again. Um, I don't really know why narratively he disappears and why we needed another astronaut. That kind of opens up a few plot holes. Because wasn't their crash landing on here in the first movie just kind of a freak accident? I know they said that Brent followed the trajectory, but even so, it kind of strains the credulity if he landed on this same planet, especially considering the warped passage of time inside the ship and outside the ship in the first movie. So I guess that's one thing that you would just kind of have to accept, this being a sequel and all, because if they actually made sense with this whole second introduction subplot of, bringing a new astronaut into it, then they wouldn't really have a movie. Although that actually brings me to one of my major gripes. Why did we even need another astronaut? I'll tell you why. Because Charlton Heston didn't even want to do this movie. He didn't. He accepted, but he said, okay, but you've got to kill me off. I've got to die. So yeah, he was reluctant, which, that, coupled with the fact that they really seem to be grasping at straws for ideas this time around, really cements what I think should have been the nail in the coffin. And in all fairness, where could you really go after the first movie? Where could you really go that would possibly top it? I wouldn't know how to follow that up, because the first movie, yeah, you could argue that, well, where do they go from there after that twist ending? But the thing with that movie is that it can also work as a self-contained movie, and that, in fact, that's constantly what I tell myself, because I don't want to believe Beneath the Planet of the Apes exists, because it kind of does a disservice to the first movie, honestly, with some of its narrative decisions, especially toward the end. But speaking of the overall narrative, how is it? Well, the first 2/3 of this movie are really just kind of a retread of what we've seen before in the first movie. It very much feels like they're going through the motions. James Franciscus meets up with Nova, and they go to the Society of Apes, and they're incarcerated. They're treated like animals. Blah blah blah. Zira and Cornelius help them escape. Blah blah blah. We've seen all this before, and all of this was done better in the first movie. I mean, when they do it again here, gone is the social commentary of the first movie. Gone is the shock value, because again, we've seen it before. And it's just kind of, it feels kind of generic. Or I don't want to say generic, but it really does feel kind of, it just feels like it lacks the wonder. It lacks, again, the shock value of the first movie. It lacks what made the first movie so impactful. It tries to replicate that, again, by revisiting a lot of these plot elements, like going to the Ape City, being incarcerated and whatever. But in just doing that again and not really doing anything really new with it, you are just kind of diminishing the impact. And the last third of it is the last third of this movie, the first 2/3 of it are not terrible. I mean, yeah, it is just kind of going through the motions and really just a lot of retreading, but it's not really terrible. I was just kind of watching it and going, okay, well, this isn't very good, but it's just kind of mediocre. It just makes me wish I was watching the first movie again. I mean, it's just kind of a weak follow up. The first two thirds of this movie, that's what I was thinking. I was just thinking, wow, this is just kind of a weak, uninspired follow up to the first movie, and one that I'm not entirely convinced needed to be made. And the last third of the movie is actually when I really started getting pissed off. Because the last third of the movie is when Brent and Nova come across this underground society of, like I said, psychic humans that gain these powers of illusion because of the nuclear fallout that caused this post-apocalyptic world to come about. And this is where the movie just goes completely off the walls crazy. I mean, it was getting surreal. It was just so weird and just random. I mean, psychic humans? What? I mean, when did we start introducing psychic powers into this? I mean, yeah, you could argue that there was a certain element of sci-fi or fantasy in the first movie, but again, they weren't giving the apes any kind of superhuman powers. They were just apes who happened to be the dominant form of life on the planet in the first movie. Now you are going almost this kind of pseudoscience route. And again, that kind of works to diminish the impact of this entire world that you've set up. Introducing these psychic humans. And another thing, why are the psychic humans so mustache twirlingly evil? I mean, there is just no depth to any one of these characters. I mean, I don't even know any of their names. They're just kind of there at the end of the movie to provide some sort of climax, I guess. I don't know. But their introduction actually raises a few questions. Why have they not made a grab at power? Why have they not tried to sabotage the apes up until this point? Are you telling me that no one in the history of this planet, except for these distant visitors, discovered this society until now? I mean, what happened? And if the apes can just easily march into the Forbidden Zone, then why is it called the Forbidden Zone? Why has no one made a grab at the resources offered by the Forbidden Zone up until now? And, all of this just seems purely convenient for the sake of the plot. I mean, we need a climax. Okay, so we'll have the apes march on the Society of Psychic Humans and have this big battle at the end. It just seems weird. And even the concepts and the way that these scenes play out, it honestly seems like a really weird episode of the original Star Trek series. It goes really sci-fi, really, really out there. At one point, I almost forgot I was watching a Planet of the Apes movie. I mean, the first two-thirds of this movie I didn't particularly care for all that much, but it still felt like a Planet of the Apes movie. When they introduce these psychic humans, it just feels like something completely different. Again, like a Star Trek episode. A really weird one at that. And also what actually pissed me off about the last third of this movie is the fact that they so unceremoniously killed off a bunch of these characters that we have grown to like over two movies. Brent may not have been as interesting as Taylor in the first movie, but I still liked Brent okay. And he gets shot to death. Nova gets killed by apes. Taylor gets shot and blows up this nuclear missile that the psychic humans worship, this nuclear bomb. And he just completely destroys the world, which, first of all, they worship a bomb? What? Okay, and then also, doesn't this basically render Taylor's whole cause in the first movie completely void? Because he is constantly fighting these apes in the first movie who basically say that man is this savage beast who who just destroys and uses up resources, blah 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 blah. And with Taylor blowing up the world in this movie, doesn't that kind of prove the apes right? I mean, a more fulfilling climax, I think, would have been finding another way. I mean, I don't really know how they would have found the other way because, again, the movie just gets so crazy and random that honestly anything could have happened and it would have made just about as much sense. Um, I just didn't like this movie. I didn't like this movie. It feels every bit as long as it is. It's almost 2 hours long, and the reason for that is because a lot of it is just kind of retreading territory, and the original ideas that it does come up with are just so weird that it just completely jumps the shark, in my opinion. Again, there are people who like this movie. I'm just not one of them. I can't really. I do agree that it has its own merits. Um, but as a follow up to the original, I think it dramatically fails. The acting is good. The the suits look like they were recycled from the first one, so I guess they're still good. The cinematography I can't really complain about. And you could have had some interesting ideas here, with expanding upon this world and showing these human survivors, these intelligent human survivors. But it's again, I think they just went a little too far into the realm of sci-fi. To the point where I honestly think that Pierre Boule's original draft for this would have actually been better, because apparently what he wanted to do with the sequel when they approached him was have Taylor lead this human uprising, and they the studio rejected him because they thought that would lack the surprise of the first movie, which I can't really argue with the studio's reasoning behind that, because I certainly was surprised at this movie, but I think it was for the wrong reasons.